G'day mates, it's Busta here, and I would like to give Handy a big shout out for sponsoring this episode. So over the past few months, our homes and apartments have been seeing a lot of us, and they're definitely starting to look like it too. With all the added cooking, foot traffic and normal wear and tear times 3, if ever there was a time that your home or apartment needed a deep clean, it's probably right now. And Handy is here to help. Handy is the safe and easy way to book home cleanings on a schedule that works for you. I really love just how convenient it is to schedule things in by using their app or website, which allows you to book home cleaning in just 60 seconds. Handy will match you to a top-rated pro in your area, or you can choose who you want to work with. You can even compare profiles and read real customer reviews too. Also, what you see is what you pay, and you pay securely on the app, which means that there's no need to worry about cash or checks. In fact, you can even tip your pro directly on the app. And no need to worry, 100% of the tips go directly to the pros. And for my listeners, Handy has a special limited time offer. Get your first 3-hour cleaning for only $39 when you sign up for a cleaning plan. Go to handy.com/scared and enter the promo code SCARED. That's a 3-hour home cleaning for $39 with a cleaning plan at handy.com/scared. Promo code SCARED. The terms and conditions apply. Visit Handy's website for more information. Handy, the most reliable name in house cleaning. Once when I was 6 or 7, I was trick-or-treating with my cousin, who was 12 at the time. It was getting late, and we decided to just hit one more last street, and then we'd call it quits. The first house was done, and there were only 4 that were still up and handing out candy. We split up to cover more houses more quickly, and I went up the road, got my candy from the 2 houses that I was assigned by my cousin for, and I go back to meet her. I go to where our rendezvous point was, and she's not there. So I just decide to go to the 2 houses that she went to. I got to the first one, and I knock, and a handsome 25 to 30-year-old man answers and asks me if I want to come in to get my candy. And I'm about to agree when my cousin wails like a bat out of hell and comes out of that room that was just around the corner of that front door. She shoves the guy into the wall, grabs me, and bolts out of the house as quickly as she can. I'm screaming because I dropped my candy bag, and she's crying a little. Our house wasn't far from that point, and when we get home, she was just in absolute hysterics, blubbering to my mum and her sister about what had happened. I didn't get it then, but a couple of years later, my mum explained that my cousin had refused to go in to get the candy, and he hit her in the head and actually dragged her into the house, half unconscious. When I got to the door, she heard my voice and came to enough to get up and get the heck out of there. And apparently, my mum called the police, and upon searching the man's house, they found emails on his computer that were linked to a human trafficking ring. It chills me to my bones to this day to think about what would have happened if I had just waited for her to come instead of going to that man's house like I did. This cousin is actually in therapy because of PTSD from that incident now, and that was the last time that she ever went trick-or-treat. So yesterday, I was walking back home after hanging out with some friends. Before anyone asks, too, I was completely sober and in my right mind. I've never been afraid to walk alone in the dark. I'm quite tall and intimidating looking from a distance, and I always bring a pocket knife when I know that I'll be walking in the dark. Anyways, so I was walking past some woods on the way back to my house, and I heard my mother's voice call out, "Gabriel, help," from inside the woods. I immediately recognized her voice, and I turned to look into the woods, as she kept calling my name over and over again. I couldn't see anything, it was just far too dark to see through the trees, but I called back, heading towards the woods. "Mum?" She sounded like she was in trouble and scared, and I assumed that she had gone for a run like she did every night and somehow got lost in the woods or something. But then I realized that it couldn't be her, because she had texted me like only 10 minutes before, asking me to come home soon to watch my little sister so she could go on a run. I stopped dead in my tracks and I called my mum. The voice in the woods was still calling my name and getting more frantic by the second. She picked up and I immediately asked her if she was in the woods, and she said no, she was back home with my little sister. But I swear to you that as soon as she said that she was back home, her voice stopped calling my name from inside the woods. I was immediately overcome with a wave of dread and fear that I've never felt anything like it before. Something in those woods was trying to lure me in by using my mother's voice, and it knew my full name, not just my nickname, which made things even scarier because the only person who calls me Gabriel is my mum. I immediately turned though, and I ran faster than I've ever run before back home. When I got back home, my legs just felt like jello and my lungs were burning. I opened the door and there was my mum sitting on the couch with my sister. Now, I would naturally think that this was some sort of a prank or something, but my mum just isn't one for pranks. And even if she was, there's just no way that she could have gotten home before me without me seeing her. And so, for me, the only remaining question is, what was in those woods? So I was watching Full Metal Jacket with my dad the other day. We both love that movie and tend to get lost in it. But we like watching movies in the dark too because it keeps our focus on the screen. I was holding my dog, who was pretty elderly, 15 years old. She gave me a normal nudge that told me that she wanted to get off the couch and go to use the bathroom, so I placed her down and continued to watch the movie. My TV is next to a small backwards L-shaped hallway that leads to both my room and the bathroom next to it. My dog's wee pad was in the corner of the L. I see her walk towards the hallway, and then for about maybe 10 seconds, I hear her nails quickly scratching the floor. And for an elderly dog who refuses to try and jump on the couch because of her arthritis, she ran as fast as she could and jumped onto my lap, whimpering and hiding her face in my stomach. I instinctively look towards the hallway, and I see a woman look around the corner back at me, and she smiled at me with a conniving smile, and then disappeared behind the wall. I quickly got up and looked around the corner, but when I did, there was nobody there. I was really upset about this because, well, whoever this person was, they just gave my dog the absolute fright of her life, and they got away with it too. And the other thing too is that my father saw it as well. It wasn't just me. But he didn't see a face. He allegedly just saw a silhouette, and he even hugged my dog so tight because of her crying. He even said to me, my name, "Did you see that?" After this, too, I moved her wee pad, and I never let her go into the bathroom hallway after that. To this day, I still don't know what that was, but one thing I know for sure is that I'll never forget that face. For a short period in my life, I lived in my car. But don't worry, my life is a lot better now, but when you live in a car, you pick up systems. Ways to keep your car clean and places you can shower for cheap, and most importantly, where to sleep. I mostly bounced around the different Walmarts in the area. I lived in the south where there's tons to pick from. It's good to pick different parking lots so you don't attract attention for going to the same one every night in a row. I always made it a rule to sleep under a light in the parking lot, but one night, the Walmart that I picked didn't really have good spots in the light, so I figured that I would just sleep in whichever spot in the back and go to bed after a long day at work. And as I woke up to the sun rising, I saw 2 handprints left by a stranger outside my window. And that convinced me to always park in the lights no matter what, and maybe avoid that specific Walmart too. Quite honestly too, I'm just happy that whoever it was just wanted to look and left me alone. because all I had on me was pepper spray, and that wouldn't have worked out so well if I'd used it while I was inside of my car. It was the late 1970s, 2 a.m. I was travelling from Cape Cod to RI to visit my significant other at Brown, and I pulled over in a rest area on I-195 near Fall River to take a leak. As expected, the rest stop was empty, no cars, so I got out of the car and walked about 6 feet into the thick woods, and I took a much-needed pee. About halfway through emptying my bladder, though, I suddenly noticed out of the corner of my eye, in the pitch blackness at no more than must have been 3 feet away from me, the unmistakable bright red glow of a cigarette, hand high, off the ground. No sound, no motion, just a red glow in the black night. Right next to me, in the middle of, absolutely nowhere, at 2 a.m. And I honestly thought at that moment that I was about to become a statistic. My heart instantly went into my throat. I reeled in the goods and I just noped the heck out of there. And surprisingly, I got back to my car without incident because the dude, whoever he was, never made a sound. My heart was still racing when I got to my significant other's dorm. She was sleepy, of course, but 40 plus years ago, and it was such a fright that I still remember it as if it had occurred last night. So when I was 7 or 8, we used to live in Webster, Wisconsin, and we lived in a house a little bit wider and longer than a trailer house. No upstairs, just the base floor and a basement. It was actually a beautiful house with a big area that was pretty much just woods. And one day my cousin was supposed to be watching my 2 sisters and I, and he said that we could all go outside and play as long as we stayed in his sight. But within 5 minutes, he ran into the woods and told us to keep up. Of course, we listened to him. We ran after him and he disappeared. We couldn't see the house or even the tree line where the woods stopped. And at this point, we were lost and we started freaking out and crying, and then about half an hour later, a really tall Native American chief came up behind us and asked us what was wrong, why we were crying, are we okay, are we lost? I told him how we were chasing my cousin and we lost him, we don't know how to get back home, and he smiles and says, "Don't worry, sweetheart, I'll make sure you get home safe and sound. Just come to my village and rest for a little bit, eat some lunch, play with the children, and when you're ready you can explain to me where you live." I said okay to this, and so we go back to his village. And it's a smaller one in the middle of the woods in a sort of clearing, but it had at least 60 people there, and we ate a stew of something that they had made, and he had me draw on the dirt, the road, and our house, and he smiled and said, "I know exactly where you live. If you want to play for a little bit, that's okay, but I want to get you home before it's dark because there's lots of dangers in these woods like bears and coyotes, bobcats. Not good for children to be out in the dark like that." So he took us home, and he didn't leave the edge of the woods, but my mum came out crying, asking where we were, saying that she was about to call the cops that we were missing for about 4 to 5 hours. She asked us why we left the house without Scotty, my cousin, and I said that he was with us. He ran into the woods and left us behind. Well, we tried to call out for him, but he was gone. And then he came outside and said that he had actually never left the house, and he thought that we were in our rooms, so I told my mum what had happened, and she said that we'll just figure it out tomorrow. The next day comes, and we went out and followed our footprints, and we actually found the village, or at least what used to be a village, because there was almost nothing there now. What had been a gorgeous place was now just ash. It had all been burned down, and the grass, which was shorter the day before, now stood taller than me, and it looked like it was burned down and left vacant for hundreds of years. We called out for them, surely expecting a response, but we didn't get anything. And after some time of sort of walking around and shouting out to try and find some people and finding a few things here or there, we ended up just sort of giving up and heading home. I still think about that day a lot and what had happened, and obviously it's all very confusing, but I don't know. What do you guys think? So in my life, there's only been a few times that I've ever looked back and thought, I really could have been killed or something. And this story is one of them. So it was back in 2010 and I had just started college. I had arrived pretty early as I figured traffic would be much worse than it turned out to be, and to kill some time I decided to go to a Walmart across the street. After shopping some MTG and buying some food, I made my way out, and once I stepped off to the curb, a man stopped me. This guy was probably between his late 30s and early 40s and pretty unkempt looking, ripped jeans that looked old, a shirt that was faded and looked like it once had a design or writing on it, and a baseball cap that appeared to be the only somewhat new thing that he had on. Once he stopped me, he started up with, "Hey man, I hate to be a bother, but I was doing some construction work up the road and my truck ran out of gas. Can you help me out and drive with me to the gas station? I'm alone and I'm pretty desperate." Obviously, that seemed pretty sketchy, so I instead offered to give him $10 that I had on me, thinking that it might really be a guy down on his luck. To my surprise, he immediately shot down my offer and instead just continued to insist that I instead let him drive me to the gas station in his truck, pay for his gas, and then he'd drive me back. Needless to say, this all seemed incredibly bizarre, and I just told him no and that I was in a hurry. Instead of leaving it alone, he began to tell me, "Man, come on, I'm all alone here and my truck is on E. I'm just stranded here by myself." When I continued to walk away, he began to try and grab at my arm while continuing to beg. I realized quickly that the way that we were positioned, every time that he went to grab at me and I walked away, he was leading me more and more away from the store and more towards the parking lot, which was not very full this early in the morning. Not wanting to let him keep leading me away, I walked back towards the store and I said that I had something that I forgot inside. Man, instead of following me, he pretty quickly backed off once I made it to the doors. I think he didn't want to go inside and risk others seeing him. Now, I know that this may sound like overreacting, but at this point, I was freaking out. I had never had someone actually try and grab me like that, and every bad scenario was just running in my head. Not wanting him to do this with anyone else, I alerted the front desk of what was going on, and they said that they'd handle it. Honestly, I don't know if they did or didn't, because I just quickly went for the other exit and nearly ran into my car. Once I was in my car, I noticed that he was walking away from his spot, and I assumed that either they had kicked him out or he was simply admitting defeat for the day. I was curious though, so I watched him walk to the back of the parking lot and get into his truck. And my heart sank when he pulled away, and I noticed two heads pop up from the back seats, as if they were hiding out of view until the car was moving. And to make matters even more sketchy, he didn't pull into the nearest gas station, and instead pulled straight onto the highway. Obviously not something someone alone and running out of gas would do, right? Fast forward 2 days later, and I stop at the Walmart, and what do I find? Yep, it was him. Still there and still giving the same story about being stranded and needing someone to come with him. This time, instead of telling the store, I just immediately called the police. I don't know if he recognized me and saw me on the phone or what, but he left pretty soon after that, and I never saw him in the parking lot again. So my boyfriend and I moved into this place in May, and everything has been pretty much great. But this past week, we've both experienced some weird things. So, the first thing that happened was one night, I came home early from work. I work grave shift, and I was standing in our kitchen, and I heard the bedroom door open, heard some footsteps, and then the bathroom door slowly close. I thought that my boyfriend was getting up to use the restroom. I grabbed my stacks and was going to head into the office when I saw that the bedroom door was still closed and the bathroom door was still open. I honestly didn't freak out too much and thought that maybe I just imagined all of that. But then the second thing happened, and I sleep during the day. My boyfriend had left the apartment to run to the store really quick. We have a puppy, Indy, and we're crate training him. We have a small camera set up so that we can watch him in his crate while we're gone, and, well, my boyfriend said that Indy was barking when he left, so he was checking on him because he didn't want Indy to wake me up, and he saw in the video that Indy was looking up at something and standing up and reacting to something that he can't see from the camera's point of view. So he just assumed that I must have woken up and was comforting Indy. I never actually wake up, and I didn't even hear anything. He casually mentioned if I was awake for a while after Indy woke me up, and I told him that I never woke up. And so that's when I told him about the bathroom thing. The third weird thing, and this just happened and is the reason I'm still awake. But tonight is my night off, and I sleep like a normal person on my nights off. I'm stupid, I know. But well, we have a bell by the door because we're training Indy to use it when he has to go outside. I'm laying in bed and I hear the bell going, so I wake up and I wake my boyfriend up because it's still ringing. He takes a while to respond and it stops when he wakes up. Now, Indy is still crate training, so it definitely wasn't him. And at this point, I'm just very confused and I'm becoming a little bit scared now. I've never in my life seen or heard anything that didn't have a rational explanation. I'm very skeptical of all of this. I don't understand how we've been living here since May and all of a sudden these things are just happening. I mean, maybe all these things do have a rational explanation to them. I've written down a few, and when the first weird thing happened, Indy was hanging out with me and he didn't react to anything, so that was weird. I always thought that if ghosts were real, that animals could sense them. But he doesn't seem to be bothered by pretty much anything here. So yeah, currently I'm a little bit lost. This story is technically my mum's, but it somewhat affected my siblings and me as well, so I want to share it. So my mum grew up in South Florida, and this started during the early 70s. She was a senior in high school, and she met a guy at a wedding. He was the drummer in the wedding band, a few years older than her, and therefore he was cool, a mysterious guy that many girls her age dreamed of. They immediately hit it off, and he actually commented on her saddle shoes that she was wearing at the time. She gave him her phone number, and I believe they maybe went out to 1 or 2 dates or something, and everything seemed totally fine. He would regularly call the house, and she would sit on the kitchen floor and talk to him, and one night their phone conversation just took a really weird turn. He started asking her things like, have you ever thought about killing yourself, and do you ever think about murdering people? Obviously, she was shocked at this and got very uncomfortable and completely stopped talking to him. And this is the last that she heard from him, or so she thought. It was 2012 and I had just graduated from college. I was hanging out in my college town to finish out my lease and work and figure out my next move. My mum calls me and says that something weird has been going on. She tells me that she received a letter from this man that she knew in high school. I had no idea about this guy at the time, and she had never mentioned him at all to me, my siblings, or even my dad. She explains to me who this man is and how she knew him, but hadn't spoken to him since that one uncomfortable phone call. The letter said something like, I see you're really happy and married with kids, etc. But he goes on to mention each of us by name. He also mentions my dad's name and even where he works. Now, my parents met in college in another state completely. They quickly married, graduated college, and moved to yet another state, and then another state once my 2 sisters were born. So she had no idea how he knew that they were married and the names and address of everyone, and she has never been on social media, and once she had all of us kids, she even stopped working. I mean, if you were to Google her name, you wouldn't find a thing. She then recalls getting a phone call from the alumni association at her college, telling her that a man had been calling on and off for months trying to get her contact information, but they weren't allowed to give out that information. She then tells me his name, and I actually remember having a Facebook friend request and a Twitter follow request from this man. My siblings all had them as well. My mum, having no social media though, like I mentioned, asked me to see if I could dig around his social media accounts and see what I could find. I found a music MySpace and a Reverb Nation page of some really terrible music that he had recorded and uploaded. And one of the songs was called Victoria, which is her name, and all of the other songs had seemingly normal titles like Summer's Day, etc. I tell my mum this, and she freaks out. I send her the link, and it's hard to make out the lyrics because the quality is so bad, but he mentions her saddle shoes, her beauty, etc. They literally hung out twice, 40 years ago, and these were songs that had been recorded pretty recently. I dig a little deeper, and I find out that he's made a website dedicated to freeing Amanda Knox, the woman accused of murdering her roommate in Italy. This was super alarming at the time, but I've since not put too much weight on that since their innocence is actually very possible. But it was still all very just strange. My dad didn't seem fazed by any of this, but my mum was freaked out and wouldn't stay home alone since this man knows their address. She ends up telling all of this to a family friend who is actually a private investigator, and he decides to do some digging on this guy. Now, first of all, he's changed his last name. Secondly, he's moved to about 5 different states in the last 20 years, all under different aliases and working completely different jobs. There wasn't much that could be done since he never actually threatened my mum and he somehow didn't have a record. He still pops up every now and then with friend requests to my siblings and me, but other than that, no one knows what his deal is. The fact that he's moved around quite a lot and even changed his name is definitely a red flag. I personally think this dude is a serial killer or something, and if he's not, then he's just a very sad and lonely and mentally unstable man, and I really hope that he gets the help that he needs. But something just tells me in my gut that this guy is dangerous. My mum has worked in the same nursing home for the past 20 years and has had a few experiences there. The home has 2 floors, a basement, and an attic. Long hallways connect to the residence home, sharply branching left and right at the end, and at the other end is the kitchen and the dining room. For reference too, at the end of the hallway to the right is the storage and cleaning supplies room. No resident rooms on that side. So one night, my mum was working late and had to go and get something from the supply cupboard. She turned the corner from the kitchen to head up the long hallway. She has MS, so has to be careful walking, so tends to look at the floor while doing so. As she's walking, she glances up and sees what looks like the bottom of an old Victorian red dress go around the corner to the right, near the floor rather quickly. Obviously, sometimes residents can wander at night, but none could turn around the corner that quickly. But she continues up because, well, you never know, and lo and behold, no one is there, and the only 3 doors down there are all still locked. I don't think she got the supplies that she needed that night, and she just noped out of there. On another occasion, it was Christmas time, and my mum was going to go up to the attic and get Christmas napkins and all that sort of stuff. None of the staff like going up there because there's always been an eerie feeling, and they usually go up in pairs. On a side note, my mum took me up when I was a teenager, and it definitely was a creepy vibe. But for whatever reason, she had to go up by herself this time. As you can imagine, the attic is actually pretty large here. At the opposite end from the elevator is where all the junk that they don't use gets put, and no one really goes up there, pretty much ever. So my mum's been up there for about 5 minutes at this point, gathering whatever she needs, when she hears a rustling behind her. She stopped and paid attention for a second when, all of a sudden, there's a loud bang from behind the junk with just no explanation. And again, she got out of there quick smart. There were other things too, like the usual stuff, hearing footsteps behind her, turning around and no one's there. Apparently that happens a lot. I don't know how much of a coincidence this is too, but when the residents pass away, it's always in 3s. Like, one will pass and everyone is like, oh no, 2 more are going to go soon, and they always do. Then no one will pass for weeks and months, and as soon as one goes, so do another 2. It's really strange, but it always seems to happen that way. My mum tells me too that most of the staff there have had some weird experiences, but I don't know their stories, so I can't verify anything. I would also like to know if anyone else has heard of this stuff, like the residents passing in threes. I would really like to know if anyone else has ever experienced anything like this. So this is recalling a really weird experience that happened to me about 8 years ago when I was 9 or 10. So at the time, I slept on a bunk bed, but I didn't share the bed with anyone. I just preferred sleeping up high for some reason as a kid, and I don't know why, but I just did. Anyway, on this particular night, I couldn't get to sleep for some reason. I tossed and turned for a few hours before just giving up and going on my iPad to watch some good old YouTube. After a while, I decided to check the time on my iPad, and it said 3:13. I remember that very vividly for some reason, but anyway, right after I checked the time, that's when a big bright light just came shining through my window, between the blinds next to my bed. It was so bright that it was like a floodlight from a stadium was just shining into my bedroom. And this light was really weird for 2 main reasons. Well, apart from the obvious of why the hell was there a bright light in my room in the first place. But the first one was that my window faced sideways with a tall fence next to it, so it couldn't have been the neighbors. And the second was that the light appeared to be spinning or something really fast. Then, after about maybe 30 seconds, there was a big loud metallic bang, and it was so loud that it left my ears ringing. I still don't know how no one woke up from it, but maybe they did and they just ignored it. I don't know, but it's also possible that my brain was just so overtired at this point that I made it all up, right? I don't really know, but after the loud bang, the mysterious light just stopped spinning and just shone through my window. I really don't know where 10-year-old me got the guts to do so, but I decided to climb down the ladder and go over to the window to investigate. As I walked over to the window, my head started pounding and my hands and feet just went numb. The last thing I remember is moving away the blinds and looking out, although I can't remember what I saw out there. And the next thing that I remember is that I woke up in my neatly made bed, on top of my blanket with my legs laid together and my arms crossed on my shoulders like an Egyptian or someone going for communion. I had no pain or anything, just a slight sense of disorientation and dizziness, but that was it. My video was still playing, but only about 20 or so seconds passed from where I last remembered. But the big difference was that it was now 5:30, which didn't make any sense. In the morning, I didn't tell my family. I can't tell you why, but I just felt scared or shocked, and I still haven't talked about it with them since. They believe that I'm telling the truth, but they have no explanation for what could have happened. I do believe that life exists on other planets, but I'm very skeptical of aliens that have visited Earth. I don't know if I was abducted that night or not, but I have no other explanation for what it could have been. If you have any idea or theory, then please comment below, as I really have no clue, almost 10 years later.